suppression.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about microclimates and soil regeneration. This is really just a case study about my own home, which we are finally selling after so many years that it's been in the family. I think this home has great potential to really showcase the ability of a microclimate as well as the soil regeneration that I've been focusing on over the last few years with my studies of sustainable built environments. And so let's get started. I'm going to be showcasing more or less what happens when you do not take care of your soil and what happens when you really manage it in a sustainable way. So here we have the erosion triangle. It's very important to consider. This essentially will allow us to reduce erosion by controlling water volume, water velocity, and water depth. So this is essentially what happens when you do not take care of your soil and water management. You start to see a buildup of natural and man-made materials that can be hazardous, such as concrete, rebar, and even tires. So these are obviously a disturbance to natural habitats, especially during monsoon season. With a culmination of these materials, they can create hazard flood zones, which could be dangerous to people, livestock, and even vehicles. So it all begins with Ghillie erosion, which starts slow and then spreads quickly. This is a loss of soil, nutrients, biomass from ecosystems and could eventually completely change the entire landscape. Santa Cruz County River. Uh, this is kind of before the plant that we have downriver, which cleans our water, but you can see a lot of debris from Mexico. So this is something interesting that I found here. It's basically used for sewers. It's like a manhole cover. And it just happens to be here. As you can see, there's no vegetation around this area. It's really just sand. So suddenly we look in here and we're literally seeing growth. This is just like a random weed that we have here. And some grasses, some other really interesting things going on here. You can also see the humidity directly down there versus up here. It's a lot drier. So this is obviously the perfect example of a microclimate and how life can thrive by simply having a structure to protect it from the elements, in this case water, but also wind. Additionally, I think the thermal mass of this concrete form allows more heat, because I'm touching it right now. It's relatively warm. So right now we're in winter. And so, in my opinion, this plant is thriving because at night, after this thermal mass has released that energy, that plant can receive some of that warmth, allowing it basically to survive in somewhat of a greenhouse way. So we're back, year 2. Winter season again. We're actually in February. So I just wanted to give an update on kind of like the growth in here. As we spoke about, you could really see a few different species.
but more importantly, you can still see moisture and what I believe is just a really small ecosystem. There's probably a few insects in here, and so I noticed there was a lot of birds here earlier as well.
So this is just an image I found on Instagram. You can look it up. It's a really interesting earthwork design principle of basically creating these bowls in the ground. And so this does a few things. First and foremost, it creates a central point for water to collect. And then also, because of the depth, these vegetation are not constantly irritated by strong winds and even frost. Um, by going below ground, you also have more constant temperatures where temperature of the soil around the root system stays a lot more stable. And so I think this is a great example of just how ingenuity and simple design can go a long way in rural areas. Additionally, we could also see this building, ENR2, which I wrote a full paper about. You can check it out on my website. This is a fairly new building and constructed in 2015, but it essentially resembles a slot canyon, which we see a lot of in northern Arizona. One of these places, Antelope Canyon, I was fortunate enough to visit and truly see what water can do when the soil is a bit different than here in southern Arizona. And so now I'm going to start talking about my home, which I believe is an entire microclimate system, just because of these humongous cottonwood trees that you can see around the perimeter. Some of these trees are as tall as 200, 300 feet tall. And so I've been fortunate enough to see their effect, especially with the amount of leaves they produce and the effect they have on the soil and on the water. Also, you can see, I'm going to switch back forth here, but this is an image from 2006 and now an image of 2021. You can see a huge difference in the vegetation of these cottonwoods as well as some of the areas around the home. In particular, we're going to be focusing on this specific area, which I was eventually able, through permaculture systems, create complete abundance and in grass growth, as you can see here.
Oh, yeah.
Here you can see the early signs of Ghillie erosion. Once I saw this in the lower portion of our property, I knew that we had to take action because this quickly spreads. So the key to all of this passive regeneration is really using rocks in a very efficient way. The placement of these rocks can have a tremendous effect on water flow and speed. As you can see here, by simply maintaining these dams and extending them 100, 200 feet of width, I was able to not only slow down the water erosion potential, but I was able to create pools where flooding could occur and this flooding allows water to infiltrate down and not just run across the top. And so this strategy is quite simple but very effective from what I found here for the compact hard soils in Arizona. So once I decided to take this same strategy down in that hole up top, I started to see a lot of growth. Here you can see the first year growth after applying the same principle of rocks, dirt, and then compost, which included horse manure, kitchen scraps, leaves, twigs, anything really that was available to. I did so, and this is the first year results. You will see a lot of weeds, which you can take out by hand. You can leave your animals to also graze off of. So now looking towards the second year, you can see a lot more vegetation in the area that I didn't even perform any implementations, just the bare ground. And so over the years, it's really just been a culmination of grazing the animals for a few days, allowing the land to rest, um, keeping up with the maintenance of the swales and the rocks, um, and simply being patient for the rain. On the second year, I believe I started seeing a lot of fungus, which I found to be very interesting because that region does not have fungus. So this started to tell me that the soil was starting to develop microbial systems underneath. And this is a sign of a healthy ecosystem. And so when you start to implement these design principles over the years, you can see how quickly nature takes over once you place the foundational aspects like structure, like form. This grass here you can see is about 6 inches deep, and that was before the monsoon season. That's just from last year's growth. Grass wants to grow using photosynthesis. Water is a supplement and it's needed, but you want to leave a good top layer of grass. You don't want to shave it down to that 1-2 inch, because then you have too much solar radiation hitting the surface of your earth. And you want to have that grass growth to cover your soil. I found that to be effective when grazing our animals is rotation, and simply keeping up with the maintenance.